Genesis chapter 11. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, and a tower with its top in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, otherwise we will be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The Lord came down to see the city and the tower which mortals had built. And the Lord said, "Look, they are one people and they have one language. This is only the beginning of what they will do. Nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language there, so that they will not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of all the earth. Word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. It's been a tough year in the life of the world, I'm afraid. And it seems large events are having very local consequences. And this isn't the realization that we live in a global village. No, it feels more like a global combat zone, even if we're not actually dodging bullets. Of course, it wasn't all that long ago when we were more or less celebrating the collapse of the authoritarian rule in the old Soviet Union. And we saw remarkable joining together of historic rivals in Europe with a unified currency and some transnational government to boot. Even our old enemies, the Chinese communists, turned toward embracing elements of individual freedom, open markets, and more transparent justice, some genuine liberalizing reforms. But then in more recent times, serious challenges to all that, and it's not difficult to wonder whether the embrace of Western values is truly universal or inevitable. Are these values essentially arising out of our own broad faith tradition truly universal? We're starting to doubt it. The history of the last decade is and should be bracing. The rise of aggressive nationalism has been a blow to the easy assumption that we really were making progress down the road to self-actualization. No longer do we believe that the end of war, disease, and poverty is somehow in sight. And couple the tightening of Chinese authoritarianism with Russia's return toward cronyistic dictatorship, then add the rise of radical Islam, and quickly any thought of grand victory for Western liberalism seems distant, our values under threat even within our own societies. The recent flood of migrants and Syrian asylum seekers were welcomed in much of Europe, especially Germany and Austria, but it also prompted criticism from a number of less prosperous Europeans, a backlash from the far right, and new anxieties about this growing influx of people who are different. One insightful commentator wrote, 1989 was perceived as the victory of universalism, the end of history. But for non-Westerners, it wasn't a post-Cold War world, but a post-colonial one. For many in Asia and Africa, 1989 marked a limit to the global ambitions of the two cultural children of the Enlightenment. Modern emerging societies, especially in Asia and South America, don't feel they need to buy the whole system, even though they can see and sadly often replicate some of the more self-interested, hypocritical, and decadent features. The stress isn't just politics. We may think the world is divided by individualism and collectivism, but when we actually read the news, A whole bunch of it still involves the interactions of issues surrounding gender and religion. Not only the relative roles, responsibilities, and rights of men and women, but especially others across the spectrum of human sexuality. Bathing suits are political. And we were treated to pictures of French police asking certain beachgoers to take something off. Even the Germans insisted its Olympic women's beach volleyball team wear bikinis, while the issue in North Carolina is who uses what bathroom. Now, in its rejection of liberal notions of sexual equality and choice, conservative Western nations have allies. They have allies among many in Africa, and with a rainbow, so to speak, of religious teachings from Islam to the Vatican to fundamentalist Protestants and Orthodox Jews. These more forceful, less nuanced interpretations of religion, especially in areas of instability and insecurity, can be a reassuring response to the confusions of modern life. But strict laws and tight customs can also become an enemy to religious freedom and diminish tolerance for others. Given the choice, lots of people say they prefer to live in our societies, but mainly because they can do better economically and have some freedom from oppression. So maybe it's wrong to think of universal values. The societies that profess them the loudest usually don't turn out to be all that perfect. And we have been good at professing them. We often tie democratic reforms to various kinds of assistance programs. Take our money, adopt our attitudes. And sometimes the proselytizers and the no thank yous bump up against each other. Many people do not think lots of our aid recipients can even see the error of their ways, let alone reform themselves. I have to say I largely agree with our values and the humanity of keeping society civil while allowing for individual differences. The underlying argument is that respect for law and pluralism creates more flexible societies, because otherwise it's hard to hold together multi-ethnic, multi-religious groups. But our neighbors across the seas will be wrestling with these questions for generations, and they'll do it in the context of their most fundamental beliefs of how the world is created and organized, their religion, secular or otherwise. As I said, while these may be macro-level problems, they found a way to work down to the micro level, which is where actual, regular human beings live and love and work. Take it down a notch. Our domestic political situation is about as unsettled as I've ever seen it. It would be a real challenge to still be teaching political science right now, because I'd struggle for a place to start. One thing we probably could agree on, however, on the domestic scene, the subject of politics doesn't have much science in it. I do know this about the world. The way we're headed doesn't appear it will yield the kind of society, the kind of world that we or any of us really want to live in. And here's how it feels from my point of view. Every night, I do a quick check of the news, hoping that I will read of a pirate or stealer win. Please. And at the same time, though, hoping that that's the news. All too many times, and especially in the last year, it hasn't been the case. If it's not saber-rattling by the North Koreans or the Russians, then it's another report of a tragic episode of violence, whether with guns, cars, or bombs. And on top of that, it's people in and out of politics all yelling at each other, angrily asserting that their opponents are to blame for it all. We see signs of different presidential candidates on lawns when we drive to work, and we wonder whether national politics is making local enemies. And that makes it hard to say much. It makes it hard because it's tough to imagine what on earth any one person in or out of a pulpit can possibly contribute to the understanding, let alone for the process of reconciliation, if such a thing were possible at all. I just don't know. And this isn't rhetorical modesty. I really feel more than a little sideways, as Fred Rogers used to say. Sideways, and I'm not sure what to do about it. I really have no chance at truly understanding the plight of Syrian refugees sitting in wet, colder by the day Greek camps. And I can't send them all dry tents and visas. I don't know how to completely understand or to work against those threats posed by such radical groups as ISIS in the Middle East, or the Basques in Spain, or the KKK in this country. I don't fully appreciate just how endemic racism is, not just in other countries, but right here in this one. I don't really appreciate just how hurtful and discouraging it can be to be assumed guilty in a country where being presumed innocent is enshrined in our most bounty of documents. And I sure don't know what to do about the scourge of partisan politics, fueled by so much misinformation it's all but impossible to know where to begin. What's worse, and I'm still working on this one, is the growing fear that we've lost the ability to agree on what the basic facts are. And if we can't come to some agreement about the facts, then it's all but impossible to judge a position based on them. I wouldn't even start on climate change, or negative interest rates, or the Steeler pass defense. I don't know. We've not only lost our sway in the world, we've lost our way a bit, I think. These are discouragingly difficult issues, and I don't even have any confidence we're asking the right questions. I do know this, that at some point, both great joys and great sorrows have something in common. They both cause us to, well, overflow. They make us overflow because they're too big to contain. And overflow joy, that's easy. We can dance it out, we can laugh it out, we can cheer, share high fives, pop the champagne. I don't have a problem with joy, or happiness, or even grace. Those are to be celebrated and shared. Moreover, I can easily tie those blessings to the divine causes, to bolster preaching that God is for us, looking after us, protecting us, maybe even some evidence for the hope that life is good and beautiful and maybe basically fair. Suffering is not so easy. Many of the reactions posing as answers are terrible and can make something bad even worse. This is God's will. Really? Do we have no part? Is it all a vengeful deity? Or, well, stuff happens. It does, but that doesn't mean a thing. So like saying time passes or the weather changes. There's no understanding there. There's no support at all. I'm very tired of responses that make tragedy into an opportunity for learning. Thanks, not for me. I don't want anyone attending that school. Then there's the old, well, this will make people do something about whatever horrible thing just happened. Nuts. Suffering in the lives of real people isn't reducible to public policy proposals. Liz Gilbert has a favorite. God never gives us more than we can handle. And she rightly calls that arrogant in the extreme, claiming to know God's plans for doling out pain. It also makes the listener feel terrible just for feeling terrible. I find myself asking a basic theological question, though, which tends to be the same for a whole river barge full of these problems. What is this for, Lord? What's the suffering for? How do you want us to deal with it? What can we say or do or think or pray that will help? And where do we find the strength to just keep on keeping on? In the face of terrible tragedy, which to my way of thinking is international and American political hyper-partisanship, I, for myself, can only say I don't know. Does that mean, though, that we've run out of capital A answers? Because there often just aren't any that have any general application. Friends, the reality is that we will find enough of an answer to allow us to put one foot in front of another this afternoon and Monday morning too. And I think that answer has something to do with presence. First, God's presence. Somehow, some way, God is not out of the picture here. Faith that God is working, can, does, and should keep us moving. But we can also share our own presence. People of love and compassion are good at that. We can sit in silence with the suffering and say, I will stay here with you. I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to stick it out with you anyhow. And this is good not only for individuals, but also for communities, for nations even. Admit, we don't know exactly why all this is happening, but we will stay here with you. We will try to find a way forward with you because we won't be by ourselves. Great, compassionate souls have always taken their sorrows and turned them into love. Maybe we can't directly help. We can't directly help lots of people. We can't help the thousands on the shore in Calais. But maybe we can help this one here. We never have to look very far to find a suffering soul. There's always someone in trouble, and I tell myself, check in with that person today. Don't try to solve their life. Don't answer for God. Don't offer neat, dismissive reasons or try to fix the whole world. Just say, I don't know everything, but I will be here with you in this. We can turn our overflows of sorrow into love, and sometimes that's the only thing we can do while we wait and pray humbly, I hope, for perspective. And may it come soon.